Hi, my name is Kristen and this is Kristen Craves Books. So this is my third month doing this vlog style wrap up and I'm having so much fun with it. And just like always, I'm coming to you with 3 books already read, but it's only the 5th of September. 2 of the books I started in August, so I had to finish them, and one I just finished about 10 minutes ago and desperately want to talk about, so I thought it was about time I started this vlog. So I will start with the 2 that I started in August, and the first one is Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. My friends and I, the members of the Book Checkout Book Club, discussed this a couple days ago. Well, it'll be a month ago by the time you're seeing this, so I will leave that linked down below if you're interested. It's funny because we all really like this. Everybody gave it 4 stars or above, but we all had things that we liked about it and didn't like about it, and they were all different. We never agree. Even if we agree on a rating, we never agree on what we liked. That is just fun and typical of us. So I give this a 4-star. It is more epic fantasy than I typically read, so for me that's amazing. There are a lot of names and characters to wrap your head around in different places and politics and stuff. The first 300 pages of the 600-page book, it was a lot. I think I might have put it down if I wasn't reading it for the book club, and that would have been a shame because I ended up really liking it in the end. There's a certain scene that happens 300 pages in and I was hooked after that. I couldn't put this down. I read through the rest of this so quickly. I tabbed it and everything. I loved it. I really need to continue on with this series before I forget everything that happened because I'm curious. And this follows a character named Ren who is pulling off a con with her sister Tess, who I adored. If you're into fashion, you're gonna like Tess as a character and actually wish she had her own books and novels because she's fascinating to me. But Ren is trying to infiltrate herself into this family and quickly realizes that this family does not have as much money as she thought, but she starts to form connections with them. And then there are also mysteries that unravel here, and it gets pretty dark, and there's a lot of different narratives and threads throughout the story and some really fantastic side characters. And while there is a romance kind of brewing in here, I don't even know 100% who it's going to be with in the end, so don't go into this thinking it's a romance. That is actually kind of refreshing about it. And yeah, I just thought that there are a lot of questions that I have left unanswered in this, but I'm sure by the end of the series they will all be wrapped up and I will love it. But it was just that first 300 pages where it was really slow for me that I couldn't give it 5 stars, but the second half, strong 5 stars. Loved everything about it. But if you want to hear more of our thoughts, I'll leave that discussion linked down below because I think we talked about this book mostly. We obviously got distracted into other topics, but for 2 hours because there's just a lot to dissect about this one. And then after we finished, we realized that there was even more to talk about that we missed. So yeah, check that out and then check out this book because I do recommend it. And then I finally did it. I read Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, and for somebody who just loves cozy fantasy as much as I do, it's shocking that I haven't gotten to this yet because I feel like it's a staple. When you think of cozy fantasy these days, it's Legends and Lattes and Half a Soul, and I finally read it and everybody's right. It is fantastic. Our 2 main characters, Dora and Elias, are everything. Their banter is so great, and I really appreciated some of the choices that Olivia Atwater made in this, and I can't go into it because it's a spoiler, but it's called Half a Soul because our main character Dora is kind of cursed by a fairy, and he ends up taking half her soul, so she doesn't feel emotions quite as deeply as other people around her would. She knows how she's supposed to feel in a certain moment and she can fake those feelings, but she doesn't actually feel them. And nobody quite understands her until she meets Elias, and he appreciates her for who she is because he's a bit like that and he is so grumpy, and I love him for it. And there are some great side characters as well, like his best friend Albert, who is more of a sunshine and just appreciates Elias. I loved him as well. I love seeing everybody get their happily ever afters. Our main character Dora's cousin Vanessa is the one person in her life that she is close to and that she feels comfortable around, and it is like a regency, so it's all about finding husbands and having to follow certain social norms and things like that, and that can be difficult for Dora. And of course there's that fantasy element with the fae as well, and I've heard that the rest of the books in the series don't follow the same characters, but that's okay. I am curious to see what happens there. It's interesting because I read Small Miracles by Olivia Atwater for Spitbo last year, and it felt quite different from this. So, but though they're both fantasy set in the real world, I don't think I would have realized that they were by the same author. It's very different, but I appreciated them both for different reasons. But yeah, the number one thing about this one was the banter. Loved it. I wish it was a little bit more slow burn. That's why I didn't give it 5 stars. I feel like we could have been longer than this. It's under 300 pages. I would have loved more banter between them, a longer progression in their relationship, because we reached a certain point where I just felt like it happened so quickly, but I adored them. And if you are not somebody who likes like Becky Chambers and some of the themes that are so on the nose, you know what I mean, you might not like that in this, but I don't mind that. I actually like when an author just gets right to the point and the themes are on the nose once in a while. That works for me. You know, I adore Becky Chambers. But if you don't appreciate that, that might not work for you in Half a Soul, but I loved it. I'd definitely be continuing on with the series. I understand why this is so well loved, and yeah, so that was a win. And then I just finished an ALC of Starling House by Alix E. Harrow. This was my first book from Alix E. Harrow, and she's one of those authors where I feel like she's hit or miss for people. Some people love like one book by her and don't like the others. So I am reluctant to continue on to her backlist, even though Starling House really worked for me. But it has so many of my buzzwords. It's gothic, small town, horror, and the house in this is sentient. It is so much a character. I actually wish we got more of the house's personality, but the house has a personality, and that is so hard to find. I love haunted house stories, but I much prefer when the house itself is a character and is alive, and it was perfection. I love that part of this. I was shocked kind of to realize when I was listening to this that it is first person. So if you don't like Opal as a character, I don't know that you'll get along with this. This is one of those books that I can see people either absolutely loving or it's just not working for them at all. So it's hard to know who to recommend it to, but it is first person. And you know how in a lot of books, the main character is so beautiful and the author really wants you to know just how beautiful they are. In this one, it is the opposite. It is mentioned many times that Opal is not pretty, and I don't think we needed it that many times, but yeah, so that was a little heavy-handed for me in that case, but it was something different. I did think Opal was a unique character. I really appreciated being inside of her head and seeing how she has this idea of herself and how people see her, but maybe that's not all true. Her mother dies before the book begins, and she is left to participate in like petty theft, and she has to forge documents in order to keep custody of her younger brother Jasper, who is very bright, and she's just doing everything she can to help him succeed at life and get out of this town. And since she can remember, she's had dreams about the Starling House and always felt pulled towards it, and through a series of events she ends up working there and cleaning the place, and house kind of embraces her, and I just love it. And she may or may not have some kind of romance with Arthur, who is the caretaker of Starling House at this point, and there's definitely some sinister things happening in the Starling House. And there's also a cat that they call Hellcat, and I really liked the cat. And yeah, I just thought this was really compelling. Some things that I didn't like were that, you know, when the author wants to give you a backstory of a certain character, it'll be like, okay, and then Jasper sat and told me this story, and then we get Jasper telling the story, and that happens with Arthur and with another character as well, where it's just like, here's the monologue so that you get this background that you need. And like, you needed the background. I thought the background that we got was really, really interesting and really added to my positive feelings about the book, but I thought that maybe there was a more subtle way to give us that information, if you know what I mean. Yeah, just that, and I wish that we actually got more of the house because I loved it. And I am curious to see how I will like other things by this author, even though they're very different. So if you have read Alix E. Harrow, let me know what you think I should try. And yeah, if you like gothic haunted house stories that are set in small towns, I highly recommend giving this a try. I really like the audiobook, and this comes out in October. As you can see, I'm in a new setting, well, an old setting. I'm back home and I'm already missing the beach desperately, but I have managed to read 2 things while I've been home, cleaning up and just getting back to normal life. And they were both audiobooks because that's just what I have the brain power for right now. And I want to talk about them because they were both excellent, and both books I would highly recommend and I think are perfect for the fall season. So the first one is I Feed Her to the Beast, and the Beast is Me, and this is the greatest title I have ever heard. That is part of why I read this book in the first place. Another reason is I do love YA horror. I'm a sucker for it. And anything to do with ballet and the dark side of ballet, I've talked about this a few times. I just love, like, I'm a center stage person. I saw center stage in theaters and fell in love with it. So anything that shows how dark that world can be and the drama that happens, I'm gonna read. And the fact that this one also has like a monster element, there are demons and like a paranormal twist in this, makes it that much better for me. And I'm shocked that this is a debut, but there have been so many stellar debuts this year, and this is by Jamison, Shea. And at the end of the book, it tells you that the story is going to continue, which is awesome, because a lot of these YA horrors that I read, they're standalones, which, you know, I love a standalone, but sometimes the setup and the character work and just the whole concept is so well done that you want more, and that was the case for this one, and we're getting it. And I have to tell you the title because, again, the greatest title. So the title for the sequel is I Am the Dark That Answers When You Call. So this follows a young girl who is a ballerina in Paris at this really prestigious dance academy, and she's one of the only few black dancers here, and so she's already having to work twice as hard. And she ends up in a situation where maybe she can make a deal to get some kind of power, and this might be overwhelming to her, but maybe she also ends up embracing it and using it to get her way, and it's awesome. I was rooting for her, even though you're like, oh, that is the wrong decision, you're kind of a bad person, this is very morally gray, but you understand every motivation, every choice that she makes. The people around her are mean to her. She's always been put in a position where she is kind of overlooked, even though she's so talented. And this, her whole life is ballet. And I think that's what happens when you're in this dance world. It's just so all-consuming, and that's what happens. And this is like a metaphor in a lot of ways. There's also romance in here, but it's so in the background and slow burn and not at the forefront at all. You can almost overlook it, like it's not important to the story, but it is in there, and I did kind of like it, and I hope we get some more development of that in the second book. But I just loved this. It's a villain origin story at the end of the day. I think that you might have to get a little bit used to the writing because it's kind of beautiful. It's almost lyrical and maybe not what you expect in a book like this one. It can be a little bit confusing and convoluted, and some of it probably went over my head, and I need to reread it just in terms of who she's actually making this deal with and what happens with her, because it's a lot goes on in here, but all surrounding this dance academy, her trying to move up in the world of ballet, trying to become an apprentice, and then getting lead roles, and we get some of the performances that they do as well. Then of course just the regular drama that you would get in a world like that. I just thought this was fantastic. I absolutely ate this up, and I think it's perfect for this time of year, so highly recommend that one. I thought the audio was really good as well. Dying for the sequel. Now, how do I even begin to talk about this next one? It was a 5-star. I'm just gonna tell you, it was a 5-star, and I didn't see it coming. This is House of Roots and Ruin by Erin A. Craig. Now, I loved the first book in this series, which is House of Salt and Sorrows. Now, these are so tonally different. The first book is more like atmospheric, haunted house, creepy, eerie, ghosty, all that kind of vibe. It's on an island. It's a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling. It's gothic. It's following the sisters, and it's more isolated. This one is following a character from book 1, but I even think telling you who that character is kind of spoils book 1. Even though it's kind of confusing, even though I don't think you have to read book 1 to read book 2, if you just want to skip, if like gothic haunted house stuff isn't your thing, and if it maybe sounds too scary for you, you can jump to book 2 and I think you'll be fine. But if you do want to read book 1, yeah, I don't want to spoil who it even follows in book 2. But book 2 is more disturbing than book 1. Not scary, but disturbing. And the first half, I wasn't sure how I was feeling about it. Our main character is really naive, but she's been put into a position where she kind of has to be, and she realizes something about herself that everybody has been keeping from her whole life, and she ends up sort of running away. She is being commissioned to do this portrait of the Duke and Duchess's son, and she takes that on even though everybody warns her not to go to this house, and things start to unravel from there. And there is a romance, and then the second half happens, and my mind was just blown. So many twists and turns. There was a lot that I could kind of see coming, but not in the way that it unraveled. Then something would happen, and I was blindsided by it. It was just a lot. It's a page turner. Once you get to that 50% mark, even if you're not feeling the first half, you have to push through. I'm telling you, you have to, because that last half is just wild. It's out there. There's some huge WTF moments. I said WTF to myself about 50 times in the last half. I just couldn't believe what was happening. I think it's a perfect buddy read. Like, I think you need somebody to talk about this book with, because it's just so much is going on. The last line got to me. We better be getting another book. I hope we don't have to wait as long for the next book, because I need to know where this is going. Fantastic. Can't hype that one up enough. Even if you read the first one and didn't love it, and you've been reluctant to try the second one, it's so different. I think it's worth giving a shot, just to have your mind blown, just if you like twists and turns and oh my god, what is happening moments. There are so many good reveals in that, and I don't think it's perfect in everything it does, but it was a perfect reading experience for me, and it was exactly what I needed, and now I feel like I'm in a slump. So I was reading a different book, but I'm just not in the headspace for it now, because I just have House of Roots and Ruin in my brain. So I think I have to take a day off before I move on to my next book, but hopefully I will be back with you soon. House of Roots and Ruin has put me in a slump. It's all I can think about. I try new things. It's just not quite working for me or hitting the same way. So I decided to shift my reading to graphic novels, and maybe that would help me a little bit. And it has. I read 3 graphic novels. The first one is Over My Dead Body by Sweeney Boo, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I would read more from this author. I thought the illustrations were stunning. The nods to Hogwarts were a little heavy-handed. She never says Hogwarts or anything like that, but obviously the whole thing is pretty inspired by that. It is following witches within this boarding school academy kind of thing, and our main character is a mentor to a younger student, and her mentee ends up going missing. They think that she is somewhere in the woods, and the faculty doesn't seem concerned about this or to be doing anything, so she takes it into her own hands. And the ending is kind of predictable and not very satisfying, but I did enjoy the journey of it, and each of the characters in this book has a familiar, and they're connected, so if one of them dies, the other one dies, and they have really good relationships. And our main character has like a Sphinx cat as a familiar, and there are other things as well. Every animal is different, and it's just, I love that part of it. I love the cat. Had a lot of the personality that you would expect a cat to have, so loved that. I think his name was Seymour. Yeah, I loved it. Don't go into this one to have a satisfying conclusion. I mean, you do get all your answers. I just thought it was predictable, kind of ridiculous and unsatisfying, but the journey was worth it for me. Then I read 2 5-star graphic novels, because how could you not give both of these books 5 stars? It is Garlic and the Vampire and Garlic and the Witch by Bree Paulson. These are the cutest things ever. Absolutely adorable and charmed by these graphic novels. I want to read more in the series. I don't know if we're getting more, but this is definitely an author who I'm going to be following closely, because I just thought that this was the cutest thing. It sounds silly, and it is, but I loved it. We're following a character who is named Garlic and is a garlic. It's about a witch who has a farm, and she lives in a small community, but she can't keep up with the demand of everybody expects from her, because she's the only witch in town, and she ends up bringing some of her vegetables to life to help her garden. So there's garlic, there's carrot, celery can choke. I never thought I would say that, but celery is awful. There's other characters as well, but really garlic and carrot, they're best of friends, and they're so sweet, and I love them. And Garlic is very sensitive and shy and a little bit afraid, and they end up seeing that a vampire has moved into the abandoned house on the hill, and of course everybody thinks that Garlic should go check it out, because Garlic is garlic and vampires are afraid of garlic, and Garlic musters up the courage to go up there, and it's just so sweet. So that's all you need to know. And then the second one is Garlic and the Witch, and we follow a different storyline following all the same characters. I won't go into it, but it is just, these graphic novels are absolutely adorable. If you love the same kind of graphic novels that I love, like the Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich kind of thing, that kind of vibe, like you just want to be swooning and adorable and just leave the book like with the ooh, that's so cute kind of feelings, you have to read those. So that has been helpful for me to kind of move on from House of Roots and Ruin. Not there 100% yet, but yeah, the graphic novels did help. That's my #1 tip. Feel a slump, get some graphic novels read, because they're quick, they're distracting, it doesn't take a lot of mental work, helps you to move on from a book that was really good. That's normally when I get in a slump, when I really love something. But anyways, we'll move on. I won't talk about House of Roots and Ruins again in this video, I promise. Okay, so I have 2 books to talk about, which is really exciting because I think this finally means I'm out of my slump. The graphic novels definitely helped, but I think the thing that really helped me get over it was the first book I want to talk about because it was YA horror, and I think that's a good genre to go to if you're feeling a bit slumpy because they're fast-paced, they're campy, they're page-turners, they're just fun, and this was perfect. So the first one is There's No Way I Die First by Lisa Springer, which seems to be getting some buzz. It's a 2023 release. I think it just came out in August. I listened to the audiobook. I think if I had read this physically, it wouldn't have been as fun for me. I prefer these kind of things on audio because it just amps up the tension. This is one you can't think about too much. I ended up giving a 3-star, but it's a high 3-star. It's solid. It's what I expect a book like this to be. Follows a bunch of rich kids. Our main character is really into horror movies, and I think she wants to be a filmmaker, and she loves horror so much that she decides to throw a party based around horror movies, and she hires a clown to come and scare everybody. But of course, things don't go as planned. The killer clown is real, and we follow her as she tries to survive using her knowledge of horror movies. And it was interesting. I thought that the author wasn't afraid to go there. People do die, which I appreciate. Killer clowns, one of my biggest fears, so I love to be scared in that way. The whodunit part, like why this clown does what he does, was kind of predictable for me. And there is a pretty heavy romance that develops. Through all this happening, our main character falls in love, and it's pretty intense and distracting, to be honest. But I understand why an author would do that. I think it adds to the campiness. It's like I Know What You Did Last Summer kind of vibes. It does add to the campiness of it, and it adds a level of lightness and something to root for, and then it kind of adds to the build-up of, oh my god, I hope these characters don't die because their love is just brewing, you know what I mean? But for me, it was a little heavy-handed. It was a little too much. It distracted me too much, and that is just very specific to the kind of slasher books that I like. I just want slashing. Even in Clown in the Cornfield, I didn't like the romance in there either. I don't want a romance brewing in the mix of all of this, but I understand why it is done. And yeah, I just kind of thought it was a good time. So if you are looking for a teen slasher, that is one I'm going to add to my list of recommendations because I do find that they're harder to find. Lots of good teen slasher movies out there, which I don't watch because I'm a chicken, but not as many teen slasher books. So that is one that I can start recommending, and I think is just a fun one. It's not very long, so I do recommend checking that out this October. And then the other one I have is another book that will be good for fall, but in a completely different way. This is After the Forest by Kell Woods. And this is a Hansel and Gretel retelling, which is interesting. I don't think I've ever read a retelling like that before. So something new for me for sure. And it isn't a direct retelling. We're not living through their childhood as they experience living in this gingerbread house with the witch. This is 20 years later, and we get the impact of that event on their lives and on their relationship, because they both respond to this event very differently. They've both been affected differently. They were different ages, and they've just coped with it in extremely different ways, maybe not all healthy. So we're following them as they return to the small community where they are from, and we also see how all of the people within this community respond to them and what they think about the situation. And we get some more insights into what happened at that time, but it's more about our main character, Greta, who is learning about her true self. And she's been supporting her and her brother all these years by making gingerbread from a witch book that she stole from the witch that kept them hostage. And this book talks to her, and I will leave it there. There are a lot of interesting side characters, super atmospheric. The first half is a lot of build-up and setup, but I'm somebody who loves that in a book, but I can see how it would be slow for people, and if you're not connecting to it, I can see why somebody would DNF it pretty early on, because it is a lot about introducing you to these characters, to the relationship, to the community, what everybody thinks about them. Like, there's a lot of setup, but at 50% we get some really interesting action, and the plot really picks up. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. I thought it was fantastic. I can't believe that this is a debut. Kell Woods is an author that I will keep an eye on. I want a copy of this for my shelves. This was like a 4-star, 4.5. I think it's one that will actually grow on me, and I'm sure you'll see me recommending a lot. So there we go. We have about a week left in the month, so I'm hoping to get a few more reads in here, but I need something a little bit different. I feel like I've read a lot of fallish books at this point. I feel like I've read a lot of haunted house stories, darker stories, super atmospheric. I think I need something maybe more contemporary romance. We will see, we will see. I have read 2 things since I last updated you. They're very different, but I'm conflicted about, here's a cat, you might see her. There you go, you can see her better now. So I had very conflicting feelings about both of these, but in different ways. They are obviously, as I said, very different. So I think I'm just gonna sit here and unpack my feelings about them as I talk through them with you, because I've been sitting on them for a couple days and I'm still not sure. So the first one is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan, who I adore. If you ask me, one of the best authors I discovered in 2023 so far, I would probably put Kennedy Ryan near the top. Real is one of my favorite romances of the year, one of my favorite romances ever. This one, I was pre-warned that domestic violence was a heavy theme in here, and now she's gonna try and get me to open the curtains for her. As I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, I was warned that there was domestic violence on page in here, but I don't think you can take that content warning lightly. It is a very harrowing, a very difficult read. I had to pause this many times to just sit with it. Very serious topic to have this cat distracting me. But yeah, I really had to take moments to just sit with it before I could move on, because the scenes were so graphic and so difficult to read. So don't take those content warnings for granted. They are very true. And I do think that Kennedy Ryan does an amazing job of showing the reader how someone can find themselves in this kind of abusive relationship. It does not happen overnight. It happens slowly. You can be trapped in this kind of relationship. You can be blackmailed, and it's just, it was so heartbreaking to read. But I think that Kennedy Ryan, as I knew that she would, handled it well. You have to be in the right headspace, and I don't know that you ever really can for this. It's a lot. It's a lot. So I'm just like still working out how I feel about it, because it's nothing against the way that it was done. I think it was done so well. But my only other issue is that I think August, the love interest, is an interesting character. I could see why people like him. He's just not the kind of hero that appeals to me. I prefer more like a cinnamon roll. He was a little bit too possessive for me, especially given the situation she's in. He has one conversation with her and becomes kind of obsessed with her and thinks that they belong together despite her being with somebody else. And there's a point and very early on where he calls her Caleb, who is her abuser and her boyfriend at the beginning of this book, Caleb's leftovers, which just felt icky to me. So like August never really grew on me, but Iris, our main character, I adored. I was rooting for her. I cried for her. She was truly the highlight for me, and I think a lot of women might see themselves in her. And she talks a lot about how her view of men may have been warped by the relationships that her mother had. But yes, it's just one of these books that I'm gonna have to think about more, and I'm gonna have to wait on. I marked it as read on Goodreads, but I haven't given it a rating because I still think I just need to sit in my feelings on this one for a little bit longer. But Kennedy Ryan does tackle difficult topics, and she does it well, and I don't think that this is an exception to that. It's just about my personal feelings about it, and August as a love interest in general. He just wasn't my favorite. And then doing a complete 180, we have a cozy fantasy, because trust me, I needed it. But this actually, I started this at the beginning of the month, and I'm just now finishing it. It's like September 28th or something like that, and I finally got this done. This is Cant Spell, Treason Without Tea by Rebecca Thorne. I'm just gonna read to you the first line of the acknowledgements. It says, "I'd be lying if I said this book wasn't directly inspired by Travis Baldry's incredible cozy fantasy, Legends and Lattes." And I think that that's quite obvious throughout this. They are both sapphic romances. They both follow a character who had a violent career and is now trying to move on and opening a store of some kind. So in Legends and Lattes, she is obviously an orc barbarian who retires and opens a coffee shop. And in this one, Reyna is an assassin for the queen, but through circumstances, she is now on the run, and her partner decide to open up a tea shop slash bookstore in this small town. So there's a lot of parallels in that way. But the stakes in this one are so much higher, and from what I've seen online, a lot of people struggled to actually call this cozy fantasy, and I think there's a discussion to be had of what isn't cozy fantasy. Can high-stake books still be considered cozy? I think everybody's definition of that is pretty different. And there were cozy elements of this, of creating this bookstore, of brewing the teas and all that kind of stuff. I wanted more of it. I wanted more slice of life, more everyday, more coziness, more of this small town and all of the characters involved. But in the background of this, it's hard to really fall into the coziness of it all, because you know that there's this big leering conflict that's going to come, because she's run away from this really evil, like mustache twirling kind of villain, the queen, who you know is just not going to let her go that easily. So it's hard to fully immerse yourself into the coziness of this, because you know you're getting a big conflict and that this is higher stakes than something like Legends and Lattes. Legends and Lattes had stakes, but they were more personal. This one is more political. The world in this was a little bit confusing for me, but there is a lot of a world that is developed. The town Tawny that they moved to is close to like a dragon realm, so there's some dragon stuff, not heavy-handed in this one, but maybe in the second one. The I always forget her name. Is it Keon? Is that Kenneth? Keonth maybe? I think it's Keonth. And I think that Keonth's chapters kind of fell short for me. Even though they're a mage, I thought that that was interesting. I just found them a little needy and a little frustrating. Raina's chapters were my favorite. Their relationship, while it was sweet, felt kind of surface level to me, and I don't quite understand why they were willing to risk it all for one another. And I just may think maybe they just found comfort in one another, but I just wanted a deeper connection. The side characters that we did get, I really liked. There's so much potential in here. I liked kind of where the ending went, so I would be open to trying the second one. But these have been picked up and are being traditionally published, so I'm also curious to see if there's any changes made and if it's worth waiting for the second book to be traditionally published to read, and maybe there'll be an audiobook as well, because I just really struggled to get through this and to feel fully invested and to really just feel cozy, which is what I was needing all month long and just didn't quite find in this one. So yeah, conflicted feelings about both of those, and now I really want a cozy vibe, so I'm reading a cozy mystery as we speak. Okay, so October is here, so we have to wrap up this vlog, and I managed to squeeze one more book into September, and it was a perfect way to end the month. It is When the Crow's Away by Auralee Wallace. This is the sequel to In the Company of Witches. This is a cozy fantasy mystery series, but I think that this series is a little bit different than the typical cozy mystery. I think it subverses some of the tropes and plot points that you might expect in your cozy, which I love cozies. I love that they're predictable, but this one does something different. I thought, based on book one, that we get a romance in here, but you don't. You can tell you're building up to a romance, but sadly, the author on Instagram said that Berkeley, who publishes these, has moved away from doing these like mass market mysteries, so they dropped her. But from what I can tell, there might be an opportunity for her to continue publishing these books with a different publisher, so cross your fingers that happens, because this ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. And she said had she known that that was going to happen, she wouldn't have ended it that way. So let's just hope that we get future installments, because I love this character. We are following a witch who is able to talk to the dead, which is a trope that I love. And her husband passes away unexpectedly, and she moves back into a bed and breakfast run by her aunts. And because she can see dead people, she often gets wrapped up into murder mysteries. And in this one, a local resident dies, comes to her and says, "I've been murdered, help me." And that is what she does. She starts to investigate a little bit while also dealing with stuff with her aunt. She also has a reclusive uncle who is coming out more and more, and she's learning more about her family's backstories and why they are the way they are. And she's working up to the idea of being maybe open to romance after the loss of her husband, but also makes a point that she doesn't need that to make her happy. So I think that's where it's a little bit different than you might expect from your typical cozy. Crow here's name is Dog, and is a big character in the book as well. And it's just, if you want to fall in love with all the different townspeople, I think you'll really like this. I love the main character herself. Obviously, Dog's a great character. I love nosy aunts, so it's giving Sabrina the Teenage Witch or Practical Magic, those kind of vibes. And again, seeing dead people, I'm into that. So yeah, that was a good way to end my month. So now I'm gonna start my October reading. So I hope you enjoyed this style of wrap up again. I will see you all next month. Thanks for your support. Bye for now.